Hi, I'm Josh Levine, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of September 18th, 2023. On this week's show, the Wall Street Journal's Jason Gay will join us to talk about Aaron Rodgers' Achilles tear and when the quarterback's own research suggests he might be back. Jason will also chat with us about American cyclist Sepp Kuss's historic Grand Tour win at the Vuelta a España. And finally, the Athletic's Sabrina Merchant will be here to chat about the super teams dominating the WNBA and who might have a chance to take down the New York Liberty and the Las Vegas Aces in this year's playoffs. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm the author of The Queen and the host of the podcast 1 Year. Our new season, 1 Year 1955, is out now with new episodes every Thursday. Listen, subscribe, rate, review. We appreciate it. Joel Anderson is off this week, recovering emotionally from the turmoil caused by watching his TCU Horned Frogs pummel his Houston Cougars 36-13. But with me in D.C. is Stefan Fatsis. He is the author of the books Word Freak, A Few Seconds of Panic, and Wild and Outside. How is your Horned Frog treating your Cougar this week, Stefan?
It was kind of a win-win, lose-lose situation for Joel, wasn't it? TCU against Houston.
It was. How is your Cougar treating your Horned Frog, should I say? I don't know which belongs first. Do you put the larger animal first? Is
well, the larger animal the Cougar is gonna eat the Horned Frog, so probably not a good weekend for the Horned Frog ever when it faces a Cougar.
Except when Dana Holgerson is involved. In our bonus segment for Slate Plus members this week, Jason Gay will stick around to talk about America's bucket list sports experiences. What are yours? What are mine? We'll talk about that and some random other stuff in the bonus segment. And you need to be a Slate Plus member to get that. You get bonus segments on this and other shows, including Slow Burn and 1 Year. You get ad-free shows and you get to support us. Slate.com/hangupplus. That's slate.com/hangupplus. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive. Are you driving your car or doing laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity, like Progressive Home and Auto policies. They're best when bundled too. Having these two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. Quote a home and car bundle today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who save with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary.
Experiences are what people love most about travel. With Viator, you can browse and book tours and activities so incredible you'll want to tell your friends. They offer everything from simple tours to extreme adventures in over 190 countries. There's something for everyone. Download the Viator app now and use Viator 10 for 10% off your first booking. One app, over 300,000 experiences you'll remember. Do more with Viator.
Last Monday night in front of a national television audience, after all the hype and the hard knocks and running onto the field at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, waving an American flag, Aaron Rodgers took his fourth ever snap from center as a New York Jet, and a few seconds later, he felt a different kind of snap, a complete tear of his left Achilles tendon. The 39-year-old Rodgers, already the oldest player in the NFL post Tom Brady version, will now face a long and difficult rehab to get back on the field. Although, in an appearance with his pal Pat McAfee, the quarterback/independent vaccine researcher said he might not be gone for as long as the haters think.
I think what I'd like to say is, give me the doubts.
Yes.
Give me the doubts. Give me the timetables. Give me all the things that you think can, should, or will happen. Because all I need is that one little extra % of inspiration.
I think what we should experiment with on the show, Stefan, is just having someone say yes after every sentence that we say, just to kind of back us up. Maybe the man to do that is Jason Gay. He is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, and he's with us for 2 segments this week. Jason, welcome.
Yes.
You're signed up. We have now had a week to digest this, Jason. And given that you are, I am told, a professional sports and humor columnist, I think you're in a decent position to answer what I think is the crucial question about this whole scenario. Are we allowed as a society to think that any part of this is just a little bit funny?
Yeah, it's a hard one, right? Because on one hand, you don't want to see somebody suffer an injury. You certainly don't want to see them suffer a career-altering, perhaps a career-ending injury. But your mind just crosses over into this just maudlin but comical world of Jets misery immediately. And if there was a franchise that would endure this kind of situation, it's hard to pick one that's more on brand than the Jets. It is just very much in sync with what the last 50 or so post-Namath years have been for this misbegotten franchise. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely on the threshold of too soon, but
which is funny because when Josh asked you if you thought that any part of this was funny, I immediately thought any part of Aaron Rodgers getting injured is funny. I mean, I grew up a Giants fan. I love mocking the Jets. It's a fun thing when I was a kid and continues to be a fun thing many years later. But really, isn't the entertainment value, the Schadenfreude of value in Rodgers getting hurt? Mr. Ayahuasca, take care of my body, find a higher meaning. And of all things, Jason, he tore his Achilles tendon. I thought he was invulnerable. He had found the secrets to life.
I don't know if you've looked at any of the longitudinal studies of ayahuasca on Achilles tendons, but they are inconclusive, Stefan. So I'm not ready to laugh it up with you. There might actually be the need for an actual medical intervention here.
I mean, the second that it happened, your mind just wanders to, I bet he's in the locker room, like looking up on YouTube, like Achilles tendon. Is it real? Is it really torn? Can they actually tear? But I feel like everybody has made those jokes in the last week, that we've moved on and need to get some fresh material. But I think the way that this conversation has sort of tilted in the last few days, and since he went on Pat McAfee, is that where kind of Rodgers' alternative health, don't believe the doctors sort of through line has gone is, I am going to have the fastest Achilles tendon repair and healing process that any human has ever had. And there is some kind of empirical basis that we can eventually weigh that against, right? Jason, we can like look at the timetable and see what happens to see if he can actually defy medical convention in this sense.
But also isn't the most hopeful rendering of this recovery that he returns in time for the playoffs to watch other teams play in? I mean, like, that part of it kind of cracked me up, that like, oh, Rodgers might be available for the late season, clinch games. I was like, we're looking at a team that might have removed itself from contention already.
Back to your locker room scenario, Josh. I mean, yeah, the jokes have all been made, but Aaron Rodgers is also helping us make the jokes. He said to his buddy, Pat McAfee, my entire focus and dedication is about acquiring the most information and adding to what I've already put together as a pretty damn good rehab plan that's going to, I think, shock some people. He writes his own material.
It's true. And, the surgery that he got, hold on, let me make sure that I get this exactly right. Speed bridge surgery performed by renowned orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Neil Elatrash. It seems like the name of something that just got invented 5 days ago. But I don't know, man. This is, you feel bad. Like Drew Magary did a column where he said, I root against Rodgers. I want him to eat shit, but I would rather him lose on the field. It's unseemly to wish that a guy gets hurt. But then you're like, this is a guy who 2 weeks ago was like putting on Instagram Novak's Djokovic and is like fighting with Keith Olbermann on Twitter, or Keith Olbermann is tweeting about, how you can get sudden Liz Frank due to failure to vaccinate. And Rodgers is firing back, get your 5th booster, Keith. I mean, it's sort of like,
oh, that really hurt. Getting that 5th booster shot is quite the dig.
It's like Stefan is saying here. The guy is providing us a lot of material to work with here.
I mean, is there some sort of backstage scenario that after he goes down and is carted off, that they bring him into the X-ray and he's like, whoa, 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 what are we doing here? X-ray?
And I'm not sure I agree with Drew. Aaron Rodgers is like 40, pushing 40. He was a serviceable quarterback last year. He was not great. He is certainly not getting better, no matter what ayahuasca might be telling him. Is the NFL that much worse off without Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback? Yes, it's worse off without Aaron Rodgers as a star and a talker and a provider of news material. But in terms of his ability, yeah, he's probably better than Zach Wilson, sure. But it's not like we're talking about 30-year-old Aaron Rodgers.
Stefan, was there anything you saw in the minute 15 seconds of his career on the Jets that made you think that this was going to all turn around?
Oh, they're gonna retire his number right after the season if he can't come back.
I mean, did anyone catch the Cowboy Jet game yesterday? I mean, I didn't realize it was the 4:00 game. It came on after the Ravens game I was watching, and I thought, oh, wow, this would have been a game I would have been very, very excited to watch before this injury. And now the whole vibe around this team kind of feels like a long vacation that was planned by a person who's no longer on the vacation, right? It's just sort of like, oh, the whole reason we were doing this thing was because, someone organized it all and that person's gone. I mean, they're not just gone, they're out of the picture entirely. And it just has created, it is the same old Jets energy instantly.
In defense of Drew's position, that there is something enjoyable, even if you don't root for him, and having Rodgers on the field. He's had a bunch of just absolutely incredible moments as an NFL player. There was a moment, and I think you could probably still mount an argument that in terms of career value and even like peak greatness, he's maybe the best quarterback ever. And he's also he was the last man standing until he sat on the turf of this generation of quarterbacks, Brady, Manning, et cetera, that changed the sport forever. And so
Flacco,
Dilfer, there is this still, I think he is still kind of appointment viewing. He is somebody who I think a lot of us have gotten a lot of joy, even neutral fans, out of watching over the years. And the issue with him has only been when he's not been playing. Every time he opens his mouth, especially in recent years, at least I, become less and less interested in hearing him talk and in wanting to get to know anything more about the guy. And now for the next 6 months, a year, it's going to be all talk from him, from people around him, about how great he is, about how he's killing it in rehab, about whatever. And his value to humanity, I think, diminishes week by week as we kind of, the distance from his greatness on the field gets increasingly attenuated.
Which is interesting, Jason, because usually with athletes of this caliber, their platform is playing. And Rodgers has managed to transition to a point in his life where his platform, when he's not playing, is louder and bigger.
Yeah, and I would say that, speak for yourself that you're not interested in Aaron Rodgers' off-field admonitions. I mean, I think that he is somebody who does have an audience, and I think much in the same way, Joe Rogan is the ex-comedian turned, voice of whatever he's the voice of. Aaron Rodgers is that for a certain sector of sports fans. And now he has a lot of spare time. I mean, there's only so much rehab you can do. This is a guy who's already shown a great deal of interest in alternative media. And then, other stuff like hosting Jeopardy and beyond. I mean, he is not somebody who I think is going to just, slide off into physical therapy and we're not going to hear from him again. I think this actually could be the bridge surgery to whatever is next in Aaron Rodgers' career. I mean, the other part of this that I think comical is that this team was built around his needs and his personal wants. There are coaches, there are players, there are, questionable hires that the Jets have brought on specifically to placate Aaron Rodgers. Now they have.
Are you saying that Randall Cobb is going to find that the combination to the building entrance is going to be changed?
I mean, anything is possible, but the Meadowlands Packers energy is definitely weird now.
It is definitely weird. I agree. I don't know if either of you guys have made enough mistakes in your life that the YouTube algorithm has fed you the video where former Packers backup quarterback Deshaun Kaiser talks about how the first time he met Aaron Rodgers, the first thing Rodgers asked him was, "What do you think of 9/11?" And then the conversation goes on to lizard people, and the hosts are laughing, and Deshaun Kaiser's like, "It's not funny. Like, you guys really need to." Like, that's the kind of influence. That's, I think, what Zach Wilson is in for this year. Like, Aaron Rodgers is going to have time to gather so much more new material. Like, that's the kind of locker room presence that I think, the Jets are going to get from a mentoring perspective. But Stefan, maybe in our remaining 90 seconds, we can pivot to whether the NFL is going to ban turf now. Hard transition. But there is some dispute about whether turf was actually involved in this injury at all. Like, I don't know if it's even possible to tell. There have been studies. The NFLPA is using this as a moment to make the argument that it often makes, that all fields should be grass. The NFL is countering with its usual doing its own research, saying, oh, actually, the fields that we have are totally safe. I don't know if you think that the storyline will be the same, or if there will be momentum now because of Rodgers' staritude. Like, it's obviously, for whatever we think, it's not great for the NFL that this guy is hurt and out for the year.
No.
Allegedly.
No. This feels like one of those issues that is so easy to resolve. Players don't like turf. They like grass more. Let's put in grass. But the economics of grass for a league in which grass gets chewed up mercilessly through these games every week, owners will fight back against that, as they have.
Finally, somebody speaking up for
time.
the grass. Somebody speaking up for the, grass.
The NFL owners are pro grass, and not just because, right, it's cheaper, because they care about the grass. But it is pretty startling when you turn on the Premier League every week and you see these absolutely glorious manicured grass fields, and you wonder, how the hell can't we put down a decent grass surface in American professional sports? It's kind of crazy.
But Stefan, you're sort of uniquely positioned to answer this. I always thought that it's not a financial thing, because think about it. Turf is a reasonably new invention. It's not, we had decades and decades of professional football played at a much smaller budget with grass fields. Isn't there also a performance aspect of it that teams like turf in terms of just the reliability of it with which to create offense and with which to be able to do routes and scheming and things like that? No, there's no reason.
No, players really do universally hate turf.
Okay.
They much prefer running on grass and throwing on grass and kicking on grass. That's a consistent. And I really do think it's really stadium ownership and replacement and maintenance of grass fields. Look, you got a turf field, you can do whatever events you want on the other 350 days that you're not playing football in these stadiums. With turf, with actual grass, you can't. But when the World Cup rolls around in 2026, all of the games are going to be played in NFL stadiums. There will be grass fields because FIFA says you have to have grass fields. The NFL says you don't have to have grass fields because the owners don't want to have them.
Well, you saw who was in Jerry Jones's skybox over the weekend watching the Cowboys-Jets game.
Yeah.
FIFA Yanni was there watching.
Yanni Infantino, yes. Yeah,
with
he's doing
the
his own
idea.
research.
Yeah,
Doing his own research for the World Cup. Yeah.
Jerry wants the World Cup final in 2026.
Up next, American Sepp Kuss wins a big cycling race. America rejoices. Well, at least some of America. Apple Card is the perfect credit card for every purchase. It has cashback rewards unlike others. You earn unlimited daily cashback on every purchase, receive it daily, and can grow it at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone and start earning and growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply. Apple Card is the perfect credit card for every purchase. It has cashback rewards unlike others. You earn unlimited daily cashback on every purchase, receive it daily, and can grow it at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone and start earning and growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
An American biked triumphantly and no-handed, which is always fun, across the finish line in Madrid on Sunday to win one of cycling's majors, the Vuelta a España. He is 29-year-old Sepp Kuss from Durango, Colorado, and he became the first American in a decade and just the fourth overall to win a Grand Tour, as the big three mountain races in Europe are known. None of those four are named Lance Armstrong or Floyd Landis, whose victories were stripped because they took a lot of drugs. Jason, you and your colleague Joshua Robinson have provided full team coverage of the Spanish bike ride, and with reason. The race was filled with the old human drama of athletic competition. Let's set the table by saying that Kuss rides for the Jumbo-Visma team. Jumbo is a Dutch-Belgian supermarket chain, and Visma is a Norwegian software company, but he's not one of the two main dudes on that team. They would be Jonas Vingegaard and Primož Roglič, who have won 6 Grand Tours between them. Yes, I listened to some Danes and Slovenians pronounce their names. Jason, usually the main dudes win these races because people like Kuss are employed to help them do that. So what happened in Spain?
Well, what happened was Sepp Kuss, most cyclists begin with aspirations of winning races, but over time and competition, they start to realize that they might not be the most talented person in the field, and so they slide into roles where they are support riders. And Kuss is an incredibly talented mountain climber. He is somebody who proved himself repeatedly to be a tremendous support rider for champions, as you beautifully pronounce, Vingegaard, Roglič, as Jumbo went on to win a whole bunch of Grand Tours. This is a guy who was given an opportunity early on in this race to go off and win a stage for himself. Oftentimes early in races, especially, teams will say, okay, we'll throw a bone Sepp's way, let him get a stage and set himself, build his confidence for the late stages of the race where he's got to help other people. Instead, what happened was Kuss gained so much time that he was actually in the leader's jersey with the lowest aggregate time. That put him in a position to wear the leader's jersey. He performed very well in a late, what they call individual time trial, which is a race against the clock. He did a lot better than anyone thought he would do. So lo and behold, with about a week and a half to go, he was in the driver's seat. And it put the team in this very unusual circumstance of having two leaders, Vingegaard and Roglič, who were there to win, clearly. But the guy who was supposed to be helping them was all of a sudden in front. So then the predicament became, who do you pick? Because effectively this team is so good that they were just kind of rearranging the jerseys here. They had pretty much 1, 2, and 3 locked in. So it became a debate and then a pretty interesting on the course intrigue as to who was going to win.
And a lot of these races, it varies from year to year and tour to tour. You often end up in the final week with, a decisive lead for somebody, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And in this race, this was not just a kind of academic question of, who should we support, who's the leader. This was down to seconds in a lead. And so the team, tell me if I'm wrong here, Jason, but they could basically choose who they wanted to win the race. And so there was a question about unwritten rules, a question about who deserves it, a question about, team chemistry, like all of these things that kind of translate across different sports. We got to see how they played out in cycling.
Absolutely. And you got to see it play out in real time, because what ended up happening, and one of the reasons why the lead started to whittle down, was that Kuss's teammates started to gain time on him. So effectively, his big threat in the course of this race, especially in the final week, were Roglic and Vingegaard. It created this sort of, as you said, sort of all this kinds of intrigue. The team did have to make a decision, because, you do employ a strategy here. You do direct your riders. I mean, it's not to say that riders don't disobey their team orders every once in a while. That's happened. But they do start the day saying, this is what we would like to have happen. The debate really became a question of, here's Kuss. And Kuss winning the Vuelta would be an enormously popular story, an underappreciated, lesser-known rider, having, the moment of a lifetime, a career-defining victory in a Grand Tour, versus, was he maybe not the strongest rider in the race? Were maybe his teammates better equipped to have the best time overall over the course of 3 weeks? It was a little bit of a sentimental choice versus the ruthless choice. But cycling is full of that kind of thing. I mean, you guys have covered this sport here and there, and it's full of the kind of like unwritten rules and pageantry and romance, issues that make this kind of topic very fertile, but also not uncommon for cycling.
I mean, you don't want to say rigged, but it's managed, right? And that's what makes the sport so weird, I think, to outsiders who are not super familiar with it. Kuss happened to get a lead earlier in the race. And then on his birthday, the other two dudes said, whoa, wait a minute. We're going to chase your ass down and make this an actual competition. And then the next day, the leaders of the team, the suits, said, no, you're not. Back off, dudes. We want to let Kuss win. I mean, does that make are cycling fans okay with that because that's the way it's always been? Or is there genuinely something screwed up about that approach to these competitions?
No, I think that there isn't. I mean, contextually, I don't think it's screwed up, because in cycling you see, and I would hesitate to use the word rigged. I would say like payback victories, gifted victories. You see all the time two riders coming to the line, and one rider decides to let the other guy go first because, some relationship or favor. The longer view, of course, is that Jumbo-Visma has these guys under contract for several more years. Kuss is an essential protecting rider for Vingegaard and Roglic. The last thing they want to do is alienate a person they need to help win the Tour de France, the Giro d'Italia, other races, next year's Vuelta. And that the argument could be made directly to Roglic and Vingegaard. Like, this guy is going to help you. If you throw him this bone here, if you give him this opportunity here, you will have earned his loyalty for life. And he will do whatever you need him to do in order to secure future victories for yourself. So I think that part of it played in. Now, again, there is sort of a ruthless opinion on this too, which is that that's not what Sepp Kuss was there to do. He is literally paid to do another job, which is to support these riders. And you can strip the romance and the sentimental aspect of this totally out. I don't buy, however, you see this going around a little bit, that this is the first sporting event engineered by social media, the result, and I feel pretty strongly that these European teams are not looking at Twitter and making decisions based on that. I think they were quite aware of the fact that Kuss would be a very popular champion, but I also think they were worried about the backlash if it looked like they had top riders sabotaging a support rider.
There is something unique to cycling here in the kind of individuals on a team aspect. But maybe it's not as unique as we think. I mean, in Formula One, which I will confess I don't follow that closely, it's all, it's often like, all right, throttle down so Verstappen can take this one. I mean, there's individuals on the same team, and there's a choice made of who the number one driver is, and then the team's resources go to that driver during a race, and or at the very least, if it's a head-to-head competition, the team will favor the number one guy, the guy who has the most points, the guy who has the chance to win the series championship. I mean, maybe it's analogous to something that we don't see all that often in track and field, which is that you have these rabbits, these pace setters who go out, sometimes they get a huge lead. A lot of the time they veer off and let the stars, duel it out. But sometimes the pace setter wins. I mean, it doesn't happen very often. It's usually like headline worthy and unusual. But sometimes the person just goes out there and, ends up winning the race, and everybody's shocked. They're like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Or there was that Olympic race of a few Olympics back, Stefan, with Esther Ledeska, the skier from the Czech Republic, who goes out in this like second wave of skiers after, all the good ones have already gone. And she's like a snowboarder, and she goes out there and wins the race, like when NBC or whoever had already announced that it was over. I don't know if any of those analogies kind of make sense to you, Jason. I guess it would kind of depend on Sepp Kuss's place in the sport and just how you see cycling working as compared to other sports.
Well, you have to get into the Wayback Machine for this one, but I think that there are probably Vingegaard or Roglic fans who look at this as more analogous to the Patriots-Bears Super Bowl, and when Mike Ditka made the decision to let Fridge Perry score a touchdown instead of Walter Payton, which in the moment, was definitely yielding to Fridge Perry mania and how Fridge was this beloved pop culture character, but over the course of time has looked like a pretty rough decision when you consider that Walter Payton, Mr. Bears, did not score a touchdown in his lone Super Bowl appearance. I don't know if that works, but I thought of that one as well.
What about cycling compared to tennis? Because I think about we're in this era now, Jason, where, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, or maybe the reason why these three guys, Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic, have taken a huge lead in Grand Slams is because they decided that Grand Slams are the most important thing. Like there was a long time in tennis where people didn't even go to Australia, like a lot of the best players. And so these numbers become kind of like self-perpetuating, or when somebody decides that this is the thing, there's just this kind of monomaniacal focus on it, which leads me to wonder, in cycling, does it actually hurt Vingegaard and Roglic to have not won the Vuelta this year? Like, is there this kind of monomaniacal focus in this generation of cyclists? Like, we want to accumulate as many of these Grand Tours as possible. And so this is like a huge sacrifice for us not to take one. Or are they just like Tour de France, let this, American guy get this one? It's really a minor event in the grand scheme of things, and this isn't going to be a ding on our legacy.
Well, and the flip side is that, and the corollary to that is that not only will it not be a ding on their legacy, but it'll actually enhance their legacy because they did the right thing here. They were gracious. They ceded the podium to the domestique.
I mean, I think that's 100% correct, that's how it will be viewed over time, and it's already being viewed. But I do appreciate the fact that you kind of got to look into the mind of a Grand Tour, perennial, and see that, winning is kind of everything to these individuals. You don't get to the point of being a two-time Tour de France winner like Jonas Vingegaard by being, merciful, and gifting away stages. It's just not part of your character usually. And I think that it's not it's not a potential signal of an epidemic in cycling. This has never happened before. A team has not won all 3 Grand Tours over the course of the season. So this is historic. There was an interest in maybe doing the Giro Vuelta double, but I would be damned if I could find an American cycling fan who, was steeped in the history of the Giro Vuelta double or the Tour Vuelta double. I mean, these are sort of meaningless compilations that, might be meaningful to the individual riders, but certainly would not have anywhere near the footprint of what this Sepp Kuss part of it is too. And don't discount the American side of this too, which is that America is a huge cycling market. We may underperform in the Grand Tours. We may have had scandalized champions in our past, but it's also a massive market for cycling manufacturers. And I'm not saying that like bike companies decided this too, but it's certainly a consideration when you think about the impact a winner can have.
I'm just waiting for Jumbo to open up a grocery store in my neighborhood. I mean, I'll be there every day.
Well, the reporting, believe it or not, heading into the Tour de France was that, there was a speculation that they were looking for a new sponsor for 2024 and that the PIF in Saudi Arabia was among the leading candidates, as they are for almost everything in sports, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can't escape ultimately the psychology of all of this. Back to the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic analogy, it didn't sound like Vingegaard or Roglic were particularly psyched about doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, they were very cautious in their comments. Yeah, they were complimentary of Kuss and the role he had played in helping them win the Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia. But ultimately, I mean, Roglic said, definitely he's for sure the guy I wish to win it now. I have my own thoughts about that, but I will try to do it the way it is. Does that sound like a guy that was, say I'm going to throttle down because it's the right thing to do?
Sure. It absolutely sounds like that. And it reminds me a little bit of with the tennis comparison, everyone loved to romanticize the clashes of the big 3 and, how great it would be to see X versus X in the final. And I always thought it would be funny how the players themselves, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, would sometimes take the air out of that. Like their clip started going around this week of Djokovic talking about how he didn't really miss Federer and Nadal in finals, not because he disliked them personally and just removing that aspect of it entirely. It's just because he can win more. It's just this guy fundamentally wants to win championships, and whatever makes it an easier path for him is the path that he would prefer. Now, of course, context and time will make him appreciate those rivalry matches more, but it was sort of insightful as to like what these guys are actually, what drives them, which is ultimately winning.
I guess the next step for Sepp Kuss is becoming popular enough that we can all agree on how to pronounce his last name. I think it's Kuss. But he is somebody who did not have any kind of footprint in mainstream America before this victory. He might still not. I don't know what the future is going to hold for him marketing-wise. But what can you tell us about him in particular? And I'm also curious if there was any kind of negative impact from the Armstrong Landis era. Is there a lost generation of folks who just didn't go into the sport in America because it was so tainted? Or have we, if you kind of subtract that misbegotten era, is this about the same kind of historic level of American success or lack thereof that we have? And occasionally you get a guy like this who has his, brief moment in the sun.
Sepp Kuss is a very particular type of cyclist, which is he is a cyclist who was born and raised in Durango, Colorado. He is the son of a former Olympic ski coach, Dolph Kuss, and he grew up Nordic skiing. He grew up mountain biking. Kids who grow up in that region are on bikes before they can walk. I think you kind of exist in a world apart from what's happening in Europe, what's happening with, Lance Armstrong and Floyd Landis. It's just bikes are a way of life there. And he was identified rather early as a talent. Interestingly, he did not get going in road cycling until a somewhat advanced age in his college years. But from the minute he got onto a bike, it was pretty clear that he was a mountain goat. You're living at altitude. This is somebody who, was kind of built for this physiologically. Whether or not he becomes sort of a mainstream star in America, I mean, I think it's funny that we're even talking about the Vuelta a España, which is something that historically has been kind of the second dessert on the calendar, or the third dessert. I mean, it's like for sickos only, really, in America. Really not something that makes much of an impact here in the States. People don't really discuss it. The fact that it's kind of getting headlines on ESPN is amazing to me. It's not the kind of thing that normally gets covered. And if Kuss is able to capitalize on this, right now he's sort of the world's most highly paid supporting actor. There's speculation, does he leave and go off to another team where he will get opportunity to do this kind of thing all the time? That's the big question, I think, going forward.
Jason Gay is a sports columnist for the Wall Street Journal, and it's always a pleasure to have him on this program. Jason, thank you.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Up next, we'll talk to The Athletic's Sabrina Merchant about the WNBA playoffs.
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that you can stay close to your team even if you don't live in their town. Like, maybe you're a Raven who married a Seahawk who got a job in the land of the Falcons. With NFL Sunday Ticket, you can watch your team's out-of-market Sunday afternoon games no matter where you live, because you shouldn't have to change teams even if you change towns. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
It's time to get your checking account to zero with free checking from PenFed. That's zero ATM fees, zero balance requirements, and zero time spent waiting for your paycheck to direct deposit, because you can receive it up to 2 days early. Open your account with just $25 and see how big zero can be. Apply online today at PenFed.org/free checking. Early direct deposit eligibility may vary between pay periods and timing of payer's funding. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
PenFed's got great rates for everyone.
From the jump, this WNBA season was about two seemingly unstoppable super teams. One was the defending champion Las Vegas Aces, who added Candace Parker to a stacked lineup, including Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Chelsea Gray, and Jackie Young. The other was the New York Liberty, who signed bona fide stars Breanna Stewart, Jonquel Jones, and Courtney Vandersloot to a team that already included budding superstar Sabrina Ionescu. And unstoppable these two teams pretty much were. The Aces waltzed through the regular season with a record-breaking 34 wins against just 6 losses. The Liberty went 32-8, and no one else was particularly close. Sabrina Merchant is a staff writer at The Athletic and a host of the Athletic Women's Basketball Show podcast. She joins us now from Los Angeles. Hey, Sabrina, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
On Sunday, the Aces blew out the Chicago Sky 92-70 behind 38 points and 16 rebounds from Asia Wilson to sweep that first-round playoff series 2-0. The Liberty routed the Washington Mystics 90-75 in Game 1 of their series, thanks to 7 threes and 29 points from Ionescu. Game 2 is Tuesday night. Sabrina, sure, you got to play the games. Anything can happen, blah, blah, blah. But barring a team meal food poisoning outbreak, is there any reason to believe that Vegas and New York won't meet in the WNBA finals in a couple of weeks?
You know, I've been trying to rack my brain to find one of those reasons, and I don't really have one. I thought the Mystics might give the Liberty some difficulty in the first round, and I think we saw that in the first half of their game, but ultimately New York just has too much offensive firepower for anybody on their side of the bracket, and I think we're seeing the exact same thing happen with Las Vegas on their side of the bracket. If these two teams don't meet in the WNBA finals, like it's a massive loss for the WNBA, I think, and it's just going to be a huge, colossal surprise.
Stefan mentioned Candace Parker in his intro. She's been out injured, so this team could have even been more super. Asia Wilson with 38 points, it's a team record for the playoffs. How has this team actually looked on the court versus what was anticipated? Obviously, things have had to change with Parker not being on the court.
Yeah, you know, the Aces are the defending champions, and so every defending champ comes in with the expectation of being one of the better teams in the league, but being able to add Alicia Clark, who's just one of the great role players of all time in WNBA history, and then adding Candace Parker like on top of everything that they won with in the championship run last year, although they did lose Dearica Hamby to the Los Angeles Sparks. Like, you add a 2-time MVP and former Defensive Player of the Year and like potentially one of the 5 greatest players of all time in women's basketball history, like that will make a champion into something exceedingly more special. And the fact that they started, 18-1 with Candace Parker and then managed to still finish 34-6 without her, I think is just a testament to what this team like already was as a championship team. Like they kind of barely won the title. Last year they had to squeak by Seattle. They had to squeak by Connecticut, even though both of those are 4-game series. Some of those games were exceedingly close. They were so very special at the start of the year with Candace Parker. And the fact that they have Asia Wilson, who can just do everything, like as that Candace Parker was basically providing them. Not everything. I don't want to say that she's providing the playmaking that Candace was bringing during the first half of the season, but that she's taken her game to another level in these games that Candace Parker has missed. And you've kind of not really noticed Candace's absence other than the games against New York Liberty. I'm going to make sure to address that caveat. It's just, this is such a very special basketball team. Like, I don't know another way to say it. They're so stifling on the defensive end. Like, you watch some of those early possessions against Chicago, and it's like, how are this guys supposed to get the ball inside the paint against this defense? And then the way they run the floor, the way they move the ball, it's such a fun style of basketball to watch. It would be so much more fun if Candace Parker were still playing, but even without her and even without, Raquana Williams, who missed the first part of the season with the back injury and now has had some legal issues keeping her off the court, it's just such a complete basketball team. And the fact that they only have really 7 rotation players that they trust makes it even more special in some way, because like their core players have missed 2 games to injury all year. It's wild that only Kelsey Plum's 1 game and Alicia Clark's 1 game. It's like they've been able to stay remarkably healthy other than Candace Parker. And it's just a testament to like what they're building there, like the facilities, the investment that they have in this team. I can't say enough good things about the Las Vegas Aces. I'm not even sure that they're going to win the title, which is like a wild thing to say for a team that has been this good and this remarkable, but it's just a really cool story for the W.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so sort of foregone-ish a conclusion that these 2 teams should be the 2 contenders. And your organization, The Athletic, has been running a series all season called Super Squads about Vegas and New York. And you've been covering Vegas. You mentioned some of the other stuff, the facilities, the coaching. What have you seen about the organization that sort of might be changing the paradigm for what a high-level women's basketball team can be?
I mean, I think first of all, it starts with Becky Hammon, the fact that the Las Vegas Aces hired her to be a coach with a salary of up to $1 million, providing she hit all of her incentives last year. And spoiler alert, she hit all of her incentives last year when they won the WNBA championship. She's the first 7-figure coach in WNBA history. And when you have a league where the salary cap is only about $1.4 million, that's a massive investment to play to your coach. And I think we're seeing teams, try to raise the bar when it comes to their coaching hires. I think we'll see more of that this offseason when Phoenix has an opening, when Chicago has an opening. But more so on the investment side of things with the facilities, like Vegas was the first team to have its own private dedicated practice facility. There are teams that are with NBA teams that have access to those NBA facilities, but they aren't their own. They still have to share them with their NBA counterparts. But now we're seeing Chicago putting in the money for a new facility, and Seattle just broke ground for a new facility this year. So it's sort of an arms race, I guess, in terms of everybody wanting to build the best infrastructure to attract free agents and also just to protect their players once they're in-house, right? I think the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, of that core 6 on Vegas, like 2 missed games of that core 6, that shouldn't happen in a WNBA season. But I think the fact that they've really put the best performance staffs in place, to make sure that their team is as productive and as healthy as possible has really been shining during this regular season.
You mentioned this being a great story for the WNBA. In one sense, yes, but its season has been bookended by the allegations about salary cap circumvention, about the team mishandling, mistreating Dearica Hamby's pregnancy and booting her off the team because of it. Being around the team, have you developed any kind of insight into both how that stuff has affected the team and has played out within that building, but also kind of your own feelings about how to think about the transcendence we see on the court and some of those stories off the court that maybe don't put the franchise or put the league in a positive light?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. To start with Dearica Hamby, who, announced her pregnancy at the Las Vegas Aces parade last year, a huge celebratory moment, expecting her second child on the day that they were welcoming their first championship trophy to the city of Las Vegas, and then accused the organization of belittling her and, questioning the timing of her pregnancy. And ultimately, the Aces traded her away to Los Angeles, and Becky Hammon was suspended 2 games at the start of the season for basically the treatment that Dearica Hamby had said, happened to her when she was in Las Vegas. And I mean, there's no overlooking that, right? I think that's probably part of the reason why Becky Hammon only got 3 Coach of the Year votes in a season when the Las Vegas Aces went 34-6 and, set an overall wins record and did a bunch of other historic things. You can't overlook that, right? And Hammon has apologized for that, and just I know Dearica Hamby doesn't hold ill will towards the rest of the Vegas organization. Just in my experience covering the Sparks, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. But that did happen, and I'm sure Becky Hammon said some things that she wasn't supposed to say to Dearica Hamby in terms of talking to her about her pregnancy. But the way that they've treated the other players on the roster, and the fact that they still were able to bring in 2 moms into their organization, like Candace Parker is a mom of 2 children, Kayla George is a mother, a recent mother, and they've just spoken glowingly about the type of treatment that they've gotten as members of the Aces. I don't want to overlook what happened with Dearica, but I do think it's not necessarily a pattern of behavior so much as an isolated incident that got a little out of hand. As far as the tampering, I really don't care about players getting paid under the table in the WNBA. The salaries are artificially lower, I think, than they need to be, and I don't think that the Aces are the only team doing this. The fact that players were, given extra benefits for signing with the Aces, I'm pretty sure happens all around the league, and it just doesn't really move the needle for me as much as some other things would.
Breanna Stewart has moved the needle for the New York basketball market for the women's team. Explosion in ticket sales. The Liberty said that ticket sales are up over 100% growth for the season. 200% growth in season tickets sold. Home attendance up 2,500 per game. Is this what can happen? I mean, obviously, it is what can happen when you bring in one of the greatest superstars in a sport. I mean, is there anything about what's changed in New York that surprises you, or does it feel like, yeah, this is how a business functions when you give it the resources and attract the kind of talent that will bring people into the stands?
I guess the only potential surprise about what's happened with Liberty is how quickly it all came together. We see these potential super teams that take some time to figure each other out, or, there's some chemistry issues to work through. And we saw that for the first 18 to 20 games, but this is only a 40-game season. And the fact that they still managed to finish with the second best record, still had the second best offense, third best defense, split the season series with the Las Vegas Aces. I think everything came together about as quickly as they could have hoped on the basketball side. And as far as the business side of things, ever since the ownership changed from James Dolan to Joe Tsai and around 2019, I think this has been in the works. It just so happened that the first season they played was in the bubble, so they weren't really allowed to take advantage of the opportunity of playing at Barclays Center. And then the team just took some time to come along with where the business side was. But the fact that they have this growth in season tickets, the fact that, merchandising sales have gone up to the percentages that, you've discussed, that's Breanna Stewart too. I mean, it's not just a superstar going to play for the New York Liberty. It's one of the greatest players of all time going to play for the New York Liberty. And I think
she set the record for most points in a season, albeit a longer season.
Sure. I mean, you just look at what she accomplished in her college career, right? 4 straight national championships, sure. 4 straight most outstanding player awards. I mean, this isn't just anybody going to join the New York Liberty. I would trust a fan base as dedicated as the New York basketball fan base to realize what sort of greatness was coming in front of them. But it has been very, very cool to see just the Barclays Center atmosphere this whole season. The fact that Stewie started it off by, I think, setting a Liberty franchise record, in her very first game at Barclays Center, was just such a very cool way of tipping off the season. I don't think it's any shock that this has happened. I think it's awesome for the league because this has been such an untapped market. Like other franchises around the league have been able to survive during the lean years. You look at the attendance in Phoenix this season when they went 9-31, they were still second in the league. So hopefully the Liberty proves a little bit more resilient than that because they haven't in the past. But for them to actually appreciate a great team and be able to witness a great team, I think is just, again, another awesome storyline for the league.
To generalize pretty wildly, I would say that the NBA, out of all the major North American professional sports leagues, has benefited over its history from super teams, I guess in modern parlance, but also dynasties, showcase franchises when the Lakers and Celtics are good, when Jordan was on the Bulls, when LeBron was on the Heat. Those were moments that you can, if you just looked at a graph, you can see that does literally move the needle, that ratings go up, that attention goes up. With a sport like, maybe on the opposite end of the continuum, with a sport like hockey, that's a sport where, obviously there are teams that are better known and then maybe will get better ratings, but it's a sport that depends on local fandoms, on, gate attendance. It's just a kind of different model. Baseball, I think the same. How do you see the WNBA kind of shaking out? Obviously the Liberty and the Aces are bringing a lot of attention to the league. If they do meet in the finals, that'll probably get better ratings than any WA finals ever. But in kind of the long term, do you see this as a league that's really going to be about developing local fan bases and that's more the model? Or is it kind of similar to the NBA where in an era when you have super teams and dynasties that capture national attention, the league will do better and there will be more interest?
Yeah, so first of all, I think basketball, just relative to hockey and baseball, naturally promotes individuals more just because a single superstar can have an outsized effect on the performance of a team relative to, a 30-player roster in baseball, or most hockey players don't even play half the game. So individual superstars, individual superstar rivalries like Bird Magic, like Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, I think are just a bigger deal in basketball than they would be in other sports because of how much of an effect Wilson and Stewart can have on their respective teams. And then the WNBA itself, it just can't tap into that local fandom the way other leagues do. I mean, they have 30 teams around the country. The WNBA only has 12 and has only had 12, I believe, since 2008. So,
they're looking at expansion very closely, Sabrina. Very closely.
This is what I've been told. But if and until the league expands, and expands significantly, I would say, they kind of have to rely more on a national draw than, building local markets. It's not like college basketball where, you have schools every little pocket around the country that can tap into these fan bases. They have to draw, from a national audience. And I think that's what makes this New York-Las Vegas rivalry so special because it has the geographical component, right? You've got the Pacific time team, you've got the East Coast time team, you've got the one player from Connecticut, the one from South Carolina. The way these teams were built was very different. Like Las Vegas has 3 number 1 draft picks, mostly homegrown, and then New York just brought in 2 MVPs and a former All-Star in free agency and via trade. I think this is the type of thing that the WNBA really needs to, really sell a narrative, to sell a storyline, because they just can't get into the homes of everybody around the country, right? They just don't have a local presence that's going to allow them to do that. So they need something glamorous, something starry, a big rivalry like this to really sell tickets to get people watching their televisions. And I think, the Minnesota Lynx, Los Angeles Sparks had a brief rivalry at the, middle of 2010s that really pumped up the numbers in the WNBA finals when they met in back-to-back seasons. But that was only 2 years, and then Minnesota hasn't won a playoff series since then, and the Los Angeles Sparks have missed the playoffs 3 years in a row. So it's not like that really carried things. Maya Moore retired unexpectedly early in her career, so I don't think that lasted as long as the WNBA was hoping for it to. But I think what we have here in Vegas and New York is slightly more sustainable. I mean, obviously this is just year one, and a year later I could look like a complete idiot for suggesting that this was going to miraculously last much longer. But the way these two teams have been constructed, I do think that there is potential for this to last a few more years to really give the WNBA something to latch onto, for a meaningful amount of time.
Before we let you go, Sabrina, I wanted to ask you about how things turned out for the season. for Phoenix, you mentioned having the worst record in the league, but also for Brittany Griner's return. In terms of things that move the needle for the WNBA, certainly Brittany Griner's release from detention in Russia and her triumphant return to the court was a huge story at the beginning of this season. How did things play out for Griner over the course of the regular season?
Yeah, it's interesting because, she was voted an all-star starter, one of only, 10 players around the league who was voted an all-star starter. So that would suggest a certain level of production. And yet if you talk to BG, if you talk to, people around Phoenix, like they're very complimentary of how she was playing, but it still wasn't the same Brittany Griner we had seen, in 2021 when she helped lead the Mercury to the WNBA finals, played in the Olympics that year and helped deliver a gold medal to the United States. So the fact that she was able to be so productive while still, I think, leaving some room on the table to be even better next year is pretty cool because, she still managed to be some version of the Brittany Griner we've come to know and love, and has room to grow and help make the Mercury better because they're going to need it. I think this season for the Mercury was more a function of Brittany just not being available the whole time, and how could we expect her to be considering she came out of detention and had a lot to deal with on an emotional and personal level, not just a physical level. The fact that Diana Taurasi is 41 years old and probably shouldn't be expected to complete a 40-game season anymore. I think there are some real questions to be had in Phoenix about how they're building their roster around those two players and if a succession plan needs to have started yesterday potentially. But yeah, I think even though they went 9-31, just the atmosphere around the Mercury was so much better than it was last year. And again, how could it not be? This was the happiest 9-31 team I've ever seen in my entire life. They were just so positive around their teammates. And again, there's an obvious caveat that I'm overlooking, that there was a player who was willingly stepping away from the team and apparently barred from practice facilities in Skylar Diggins-Smith while she was on maternity leave. So again, an uglier story that we can't just look over. But the players who took the court for the Phoenix Mercury, the fact that they had Griner back, the fact that this wasn't this dark cloud hanging over the team and the league, I think was overall a positive. I'm sure everybody on the Mercury would much rather have a 9-31 season with BG in the United States than whatever they had last year when they made the playoffs while she was in detention.
Yeah, and to be fair, she averaged 17.5, led the team in scoring. Taurasi had averaged 16. But they both missed a bunch of games too, and that must have impacted the 9-31.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the most fascinating offseason in the WNBA going forward because they have a new general manager. They'll have to make a coach hire. They have a lottery pick for the first time in over a decade. I mean, the last time they had one, they used it to draft Brittany Griner. We've talked on this show before about the potential great stars coming out of college basketball this year. So they could reload really quickly, but it could also potentially take some more time down there.
Sabrina Merchant is a staff writer at The Athletic who covers women's basketball. She also is a host of the Athletic Women's Basketball Show podcast. Sabrina, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Anytime.
And now it is time for Afterballs, sponsored by Bennett's Prune Juice, endorsed by Kenny Sailors, who says it was okay. Josh, we talked about bicycle racing on the show. We don't normally talk about bicycle racing on the show. And they have these things in bicycle races called stages.
Yes.
Stages. Yes. They are part of the bicycle race.
Yes.
They are chunks of the bicycle race.
You're doing great, man. Keep going with this. I love it.
Thank you. So it got me wondering who's won the most stages in bike races. And I just wanted to focus on the Spanish race because that's what we talked about this week. And the guy with the most stage wins at the Vuelta a España is a guy named Delio Rodriguez. He was born in 1916, died in 1994. He won 39 stages overall in the Vuelta, 19 more than the person in second place, who's an Italian, whose name I can't really pronounce. Rodriguez won 12 of those stages in 1941, 8 in 1942. And it really feels like it's kind of the Australian Open of stage winning.
Well, that's during World War II, Stefan.
Well, no, the race was canceled in 1943 and 44. It was held in 41 and 42.
No, but what I'm saying is maybe the competition wasn't as
it's possible that the competition wasn't there. Yeah, but over his career, that was only, that was what, 12-8 is 20 of his 39. He went on to win more after the war, and he finally did win an overall Vuelta. When he won those 12 stages and 8 stages, he didn't even win the race. Bicycle racing is weird.
I knew that the show, after all these years, was going to get to, debating the legitimacy of Delio Rodriguez's Vuelta a España stage wins. It was inevitable. Every sports talk show kind of gets to this point. It took us a long time, but I'm glad we're here, that we can, move on, because this is what divides some of the greatest thinkers. It's broken up relationships. Just having.
I expect this is going to be on First Take tomorrow, because it really is kind of the question for all of our times. Josh, what's your Delio Rodriguez?
The 2023 Major League Soccer season has been defined by the brilliance of FC Cincinnati, which sits atop the Eastern Conference standings with 58 points. And all right, I'm done with this bit. It's all about Lionel Messi, even when Lionel Messi doesn't play. When I Googled Atlanta United versus Inter Miami, the top headlines on Google were Lionel Messi not an Inter Miami squad for Atlanta United match. And why isn't Messi playing today? Inter Miami star not in starting lineup versus Atlanta United. And naturally, Atlanta United troll Lionel Messi after beating Inter Miami 5-2. But no, that's actually a bit too, Stefan. This is a classic double diversion afterball, because the real story of this MLS season is another player from Argentina, a guy named Matko Miljevic. And once you join me on this journey, I am sure you'll agree. You'll also get the answer to why someone named Matko Miljevic is from Argentina. I first learned about this guy from the soccer writer Brian Sciaretta's Twitter feed, and a Brian Sciaretta story on the website American Soccer Now is the best source I found about Miljevic's background. He was born in the U.S. in the early 1990s after his parents moved to Miami during Argentina's financial crisis. His family then returned to Argentina, and Miljevic rose up the ranks of that country's youth soccer system. His grandfather was Croatian, which explains the last name, and also made him potentially eligible to play for Croatia in international soccer. So far, though, he's represented both the United States and Argentina at the youth level without a senior national team appearance for either of those countries. Professionally, our man signed a contract with Major League Soccer's CF Montreal in 2021. And so far, the now 22-year-old Miljevic has played a little more than 30 games for them, scoring 2 goals and earning an annual salary of around $500,000. Earlier this year, he had surgery for a torn meniscus. You also might find a headline about how he was fined an undisclosed amount for a pretty ridiculous flop, even by soccer standards, in a game back in June. That's pretty much it. And I think you'll agree at this stage of the Afterball, pretty boring sports career. But then last week, the French language website, and you're going to have to forgive me, DansLesCoulisses.com, reported that Matko Miljevic wasn't just playing his club soccer for CF Montreal. As an aside, Dans les coulisses means behind the scenes. Again, I apologize to all of our Francophone listeners. But anyway, that site reported that Matko Miljevic was also playing in the QCSL. QCSL, Stefan. That is, of course, the Ligue Québécois de Soccer Calcetto. Again, apologies. I'm not trying to create an international incident.
You know, you get what you get when you choose an Afterball that includes lots of foreign words.
I'm a Spanish guy. Always took Spanish. Anyway, QCSL, we'll call it. It's an amateur league in the Montreal suburbs. Matko reportedly suited up because he was dissatisfied with his MLS playing time and because his friend asked him to. And he rewarded that friend by scoring 6 goals in 3 games in the suburban Quebec Soccer League. Matko's QCSL team was named the Rage. They were in 8th place out of 9 teams in this Tuesday league, and they did not win any of the games when Matko Miljevic took the field. So not quite the impact that Messi had on Inter Miami. Also, Matko was playing in that league under an assumed name. This is an important point, which according to a Montreal radio host named Tony Marinero, was the assumed name Nicholas Sotelo. For Miljevic or Sotelo or Ron Canada, if anyone still gets that reference, there were a couple of problems here. First, his MLS contract, as you might predict, forbade him from playing for any other teams, much less in an amateur Quebec suburban league. Then, if that wasn't enough, Stefan, the amateur league found out he was playing under a fake identity and insisted that he use his real name. Instead of that, Miljevic, no longer Sotelo, decided to retire from suburban amateur Quebec soccer. But then...
There's another twist?
But then, this is the twist. Matko Miljevic, because if we've learned anything from this Afterball, it's that he's a good friend. He was attending his friend's amateur Quebec Suburban Soccer League game after he retired from the league himself. He reportedly spat at one of his friend's opponents and then reportedly punched that opponent in the face. I think we can all agree that this is no longer a boring sports career. What happened next, I think, will be familiar to anyone who's played a rec league soccer game under a fake name, then quit when asked to use their real name, then gone back and spit on someone and punched them. Matko Miljevic was told to vacate the premises and never return to Quebec amateur soccer. And then, according again to Tony Marinero, our friend Matko, had his contract terminated by Major League Soccer's CF Montreal. So he's done now, reportedly. Wow. This all happened like in the last few days. Stefan, do you understand what this means? If his contract got terminated, that means he's no longer forbidden from playing amateur soccer. Nicholas Sotelo is back, baby.
I was going to say, he's probably not going to be playing for Croatia, the United States, or Argentina in any future World Cup.
You stepped on my last line, but I'm going to give it to you. So far as I know, he is still eligible to play for the U.S. men's national team. Attention, Greg Berhalter, if that Gio Reyna reconciliation thing doesn't work out, Nicholas Sotelo and/or Matko Miljevic could be your men.
And if not, he's free to play in a different suburban rec soccer league in Montreal or any other city.
As of the time that I was looking at this stuff on Sunday into Monday, I think every story that was written about this, the original story that, let me make sure I pronounce this incorrectly again, Danley Coulis, that original story is in French language website. Every other story that I read that's in English was like aggregated from that and like kind of badly. And maybe there's been some other stuff since by the time you read this, but I don't think there's been any like original, and I could be wrong, I don't think there's been any original English language reporting. And this is like, it's bigger than Messi. Like this is the greatest story in MLS. Like somebody needs to do a deal. Like I haven't seen anybody like interview the players who are in that rec league game, any of the Montreal teammates. Like you've got to get an Argentina dateline in there to like talk to some relatives. Did any of this see this? Talk to
Messi. He's from Argentina.
Like there has to be some sort of like cliche-ridden narrative podcast about how this teaches us about the nature of truth and identity in our fractured age, like by 3 weeks from now. Like I feel like as Hang Up and Listen listeners, we're like on the cutting edge here, but maybe we're only like a day and a half ahead. So take advantage of the lead that you have here, and we'll see where this takes us.
What do you think his biggest indiscretion was? Playing for the suburban soccer league team, scoring too many goals, so he drew notice on the suburban.
Oh, that's
soccer
actually
league
controversial.
team?
That's actually controversial. So apparently, some people who are like, because this guy I think got a reasonably large like transfer fee to go to Montreal and has been a disappointment. Mm-hmm. And apparently there was like one of those games where he did really well in the amateur league and scored like 5 goals, and the rest he wasn't even that good.
Mm.
Like he's not even, a consistent performer day to day in the QCSL.
But don't sleep on the QCSL, Josh.
It's a very serious league. They don't, take any of this lightly. There is a kind of societal, like we look down on spitting at people as just a species. I feel like that's not, like when you say someone spit at you or spit on you, that's generally, I feel like, perceived as more of a diss or more of a no-no than like punching someone in the face. So maybe if you're asking me the question of where he went wrong, maybe when he hocked the loogie, I would say.
Spitting in times of COVID also kind of frowned upon.
All right, we will update as events warrant, but for today, that is our show. Our producer this week, filling in for Kevin Bendis, was Patrick Fort. To listen to past shows and subscribe or just reach out, go to slate.com/hangup. You can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. For Stefan Fatsis, I'm Josh Levine. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.
Yes.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something. Music.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.